Welcome to the Decentralized Opportunity podcast, where we discuss innovative ideas and solutions in business and technology that come from unconventional sources and often overlooked areas. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, and I'm here with my other host,
Wyatt Carson. Hello.
Welcome to another week.
Can you believe we're on our third episode?
Yes, I can. It's in some ways it seems like it blew just right past us. In other ways, it feels like it's so much time between recording episodes that I just want to keep recording episodes.
We keep talking like the day after we recorded, like we just want to do another one. And then honestly, I've got to be honest with you. Come the day we record in the morning, I'm usually like, oh, I don't want to do this. Like I'm starting to get like, I don't know what it is, like hesitation. And I think it's just laziness in me. But then as I start prepping my notes and I start prepping the questions and articles that I'm going to read, like it gets exciting again. Like almost too much time is passing week by week, but you know, a week's a good time. Don't get me wrong. But like I get really excited and then it drops off. And then right before we record again, peak excitement again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, it's more putting a little bit of pressure on myself. Like, what should we talk about? What should we talk about? But every time we actually hit the record button, we just talk. And usually that's a good discussion. Hopefully it's worth listening to.
We vibe well.
I agree. All right. Yeah. So how's your past week been?
It's been good. It's been good. Work is steady. Out there working contracts, doing some good stuff in the consulting world. Cool thing coming up. I'll talk about it on our next podcast, but this weekend I am taking my Scrum Master certification. I'm really excited about that through my Works offering. It's a fantastic opportunity, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, that's such a cool area. All the Scrum, Agile, that world. It's really neat. I was just going to say in my day-to-day job, I've worked with quite a few Scrum Masters, and they're just all amazing people, and that's what's great about it.
No, I bet you work with a bunch in IT staffing. I just think Scrum Master plus my Lean Six Sigma stuff like should make me a powerhouse, right? I hope at the very least, it's a cool opportunity my company's providing. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I'm excited. You know, you're just always learning, always improving, and then I can adapt those things hopefully for this podcast, we can get some more interesting conversations. So I'm excited that you come up with next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Technology project management. Sounds like a beast, but interesting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So this past week was pretty crazy for me too. We just got back from Omaha, or Council Bluffs, technically. We went to the Anime NebrasKon at the Mid-America Center. Emily had her first time showing and selling her artwork in an artist alley at a convention, and it was amazing.
Yeah. How'd Emily do? Because I got to say her cosplay looked amazing. She looked great in her cosplay. So how'd she do?
We did so much better than we could have hoped. You know, we came in like trying not to have too high of expectations, you know, because you don't want to be disappointed. We had no reference points on how much, you know, response there would be to our artwork. And, you know, every day, the first day was good. The second day, Saturday, was just amazing. And then she finished out super strong on Sunday too, even though it was a shorter day, and just blew way past what we could have hoped for. So it was really neat. And, I just want to, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I had some really neat insights that I kind of wanted to talk to you about. You know, we can kind of flesh out over the podcast and stuff, but ultimately the convention was just so cool. Saturday night, they hit their biggest attendance record of over 7,000 people. So I don't even know the final number with what Sunday was, but it was just crazy busy. There's videos online of like how long the lines were just to try to get in. And I felt so bad for the people because so many of the people actually come in costume, which is neat. But you have to check all those people and check all the faux weapons and do all the registration stuff. And that just causes kind of a bottleneck. So I would definitely recommend pre-registering if you're going to be attending.
All right. How many years has it been going at NebrasKon? How long has that been going on?
I think Emily said she's been going for 10 years or something like that. I don't know exactly when it was founded, but it's been a long long convention. It used to be hosted at the Ramada that was like in central Omaha.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of conventions are held there, but it's getting old.
They tore that thing down. Actually, it was sketchy.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's how much I travel west or east, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I started going, I think it was like 2018, the first time I went with Emily. They were busting at the seams. But it was really neat because it was a very hangout. They had this big kind of like central place where we could just, lounge about, meet people, talk. They had a bar there, which made the place really interesting. But this one, they moved to an actual like event center. It seems like it is a legit convention. It's one just like to compete with all the other big ones. And we got to have our booth. All the artists and all the vendors were in an arena. So they had all the stadium seating all around you, and you're in like the ground floor and all the stadium lighting.
Oh, wow.
It was really cool. Okay. And it had a really neat like circular traffic then, so people could go in and around, and it had a really neat flow to it and handled a lot of people, which was great.
Nice. Now, I know you've been to other like more major cons before, right? Like maybe at Denver or even Chicago or something. You've traveled before for other cons, haven't you, in the past?
Yeah, when I was with Game On, we used to go to Gen Con a ton out in Indianapolis. I think that's
it.
20-some thousand people. Just insane. I just remember the gaming areas where you can go play card games or board games, or they have demos and tournaments and things like that. It was like 2 football fields side by side. Wow. Just a sea of tables and people playing. And then the vendor hall was huge. And then Emily and I have been to Denver Comic-Con, and I've been to other smaller ones, but those are the biggest by far.
I don't know if my COVID-induced anxiety would allow me to go to a Comic-Con, but it sounds fascinating. No, I'm just kidding. I am fascinated by it. I think I need to go to more. I bought tickets to the Denver Comic-Con when I lived in Denver, and I was going to take my daughter. My poor daughter was like 4 years old. I don't know what I was thinking, because I started driving there. And as I got to downtown Denver, I realized there was nowhere to park. Now, downtown Denver, it's typically a problem. But as I got closer to the convention center, I realized how many thousands and thousands of people were there. And I drove around for maybe 20 minutes looking for a place to park pretty far away. And at the end of I drove home. I wasted a ticket. And I regret doing it. But also, I probably should have brought my young daughter there. There was so many people.
Yeah, the last NebrasKon we went to in 2019, before all the COVID stuff and things, it took me an hour and a half to find a place to park. Like, we dropped Emily and her mom off at the hotel, and my father-in-law Darren and we just like circled looking for parking places. Couldn't find it. Eventually we parked at a Casey's in the corner of their lot. We got permission, and I was so anxious the whole time that someone would like mess with the car or tow us away. And so I ended up like getting up every few hours in the middle of the night, and at like 3 a.m, I finally saw a parking spot, and I like went and ran and like my pajamas, got the car parked, and then I was good the rest of the weekend. But yeah, you have to come prepared. It's
for real
crazy.
I learned a hard lesson and a wasted ticket for that. Yeah.
Yeah, Denver's nice because they do have a lot of parking garages all around and stuff. So, and with their downtown area where the convention center is, you can walk to most of like the 16th Street Mall and all the other areas. So you don't have to drive a lot, which is nice.
Yeah, I learned my lesson. Metro would have been better. Take the tram in Denver. But anyways, cool beans, man. So what do we got for today?
Yeah, so wanted to discuss with you one of the insights that I got. I was just looking around a lot of the booths, and then we were beside 2 different artists. One, and you'll like this kind of on theme of the podcast too. One of the artists was from Pennsylvania area, so they actually flew in for that. And then the other ones to the right of us were from Virginia. So a lot of these artists actually traveled really great distances to go through. But both in the style of the arts that they had and what they represent, there's a lot of neat fan art and things that goes on, as well as a bunch of originals. It just really got me people watching and for 3 days, and kind of understanding, like why, or got me thinking about why people buy, like why do they buy what they buy? Why do they choose to buy? How much money they're willing to spend on those different things. So kind of came up with some different little topic areas that we can discuss and, just kind of flesh out a little bit.
All right.
So whip over my notes to the main screen here. So yeah, one of the first things that I got thinking about was we had to set up a booth. And this got me remembering all the days when I had the retail store. But you can also take the theory to like app design or web design or all these different things. It's got to be something people are going to use, intuit, and actually want to make a purchase on, right? So the first thing that I got thinking about was just volume. There's a certain amount of critical mass that you have, like with a game store or something. You don't sell anything until you have a lot. And that's one of the hard things when you're starting a company, where you're like, oh, I got some games, I got some board games and this, that, but it just doesn't feel like I'm selling anything. And then once you are in business for a long time, you're just like, oh man, I have too much stock, but it's good to have. And one of the things that having a good amount like of art prints, let's say, so Emily had a little over 20 pieces that she sold, but I would say the average vendor probably had over 100 different things they were selling. And one of the things that I noticed, especially with the people to the left, they had keychains and mouse pads and prints and all this other stuff. But when people would walk up to it, they were just staring and they would stay there. And so I remember there was a book, Why We Buy, and it talked about the longer a shopper stays and the more signage and products they will see, the more they see, the more they'll buy. So by having a larger amount of variety of things to look at, whether that be like products or features or different things, they'll invest more time into it. And that time commitment actually increases your odds of selling, right?
I can see the time commitment, but I just to play devil's advocate, I've read about kind of a choice indecision, too many choices and you freeze. Mm-hmm. Did you experience any vendors that maybe had too much stuff? Or am I way off base? Maybe I'm wrong. But I know sometimes if there's too many features, in Lean we talk about the 8 types of waste, and there's one type of waste which is the waste of processing. And the best way I train people on the waste of processing or over processing is, imagine you bought a brand new computer, and it shipped to you, and you unpack it, and you're really excited for it. You load it up on your computer, and you plug everything in. And you turn it on and it's beautiful. It's every feature you wanted, but you also find out that every single time you get an email, a giant siren goes off. Would you be happy that you had to pay for that? It's the waste of processing is putting too much into it. You're sometimes too much is too much, and more isn't always better. Do you find that similar in what you're talking about, or am I on a different topic?
So I think the difference is really in terms of volume and clutter. So if you have too much and it causes confusion, then you're going to have less chance of that, because they're not going to know what's going on. They're confused. Should I buy this product or should I buy that? But if you can lay out your booth or your store or your site or whatever in a very easy to digest way, but still be drawing enough with a large variety where there's that discovery, which is a huge part of the sales process. I know you like records, and one of the big things is like going into a record store and discovering that one rather than just having, the top 20 best hits on a wall and that's all they have. So there is a fine point of laying it out to where it's functional, but having enough to where it's interesting. And so that's really the key point. We talked about it with Emily. It's like she did amazing this year, but I can only imagine next year, once she has a whole nother year of artwork to display with it, is just going to just be amazing. It's going to be pretty great.
Yeah. So that's, and I'll get back to your original point here about why people are buying. But as far as Emily goes, and I've met your wife multiple times. She's a wonderful person, very talented artist. What lessons did she take from this? Do you think she's going to come next year with even more stock, even more supply then?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things too that, one of the other bullet points I was talking about was like connection. So one of the things that I thought about a lot was a lot of people had their thing. One, it's an anime convention, so they have favorites, and whether it be a favorite animal or a favorite anime or movie or game or different things like that. So we had people who would come up and they're just like, I love Princess Peach, because Emily cosplay as Princess Peach, and she has a really neat piece of artwork that she's done for it, and they would just resonate with that. Or cats. She drew some My Hero Academia characters as cats, and people just loved it. To go with those. So the more, things that people can relate to, will increase that as well.
Damn, absolutely. Yeah. Putting out what people want to buy makes sense. I have 2 teenagers, both obsessed with My Hero Academia. I've never seen an episode in my life, but more power to them. So I get it, and I've seen it everywhere. I've seen the merch everywhere. I've seen fan created artwork. I've seen all of that stuff, and there's obviously a huge market for it. I mean, two of my children are there.
It's a super fun show. Surprisingly, that was one that got me back into watching anime just because it's so good. But kind of to get back to your topic about things potentially being too confusing too, one thing that we did is really kind of watch the customers as they were going on through the days. So we had set up, Emily kind of designed her booth by just doing a lot of research and seeing what other people use in conventions, what they like, what works, what's good for storage and everything. She bought these wire racks, and they were terrible. We just fought with them the whole time. And at the end of the convention, actually, the artist next to her, they were like, man, everyone I know who's used those hates those. And we're like, yep, we hate them too. They're going back. Yep. They're terrible. But we had set it up to where we tried to space it out and people could actually see, but we realized that people couldn't see the prints that were above us, the larger ones high. So we had to kind of watch where people's eyes were, like where the traffic was flowing, where people were looking, where they were missing. And then we really tried to move things around based on the circumstance and the traffic flow to get maximum viewage too. So that was another thing that we really learned, is really, listen to the audience in some way, or listen to your customers, and then try to adapt to see where their eyes are going, or where, the flow of how things are working, like being very adaptable, which I thought was amazing lesson in life, right?
Absolutely.
Or in business.
I could do multiple podcasts on the voice of the customer, but we won't hear right now. But yeah, absolutely. That's awesome, because a lot of people don't pay attention to that. Some people start and run businesses by what they want, how they want. And with I won't say zero, but less regard for their customer, which is insane. It's insane. Why would you start a business based off of only what you want to do without taking in consideration that customer satisfaction? It's important.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I do a lot of art as well, and I had a conversation with one of our good friends, Shane, and we were talking about art, and he's like, Emily's art really connects with people. He's like, your art's just pretty. And I was like, you know what? It's really true though. He's very brutally honest person. But he hits it home, and I'm like, one of the things that I don't do in many ways is I don't think about why someone would want to buy this piece, where they're going to display it, what they're going to use it for, who they would want to give it to, or different things like that. And I just make a pretty picture. It's like, oh, that's a cool dragon, or oh, that's a neat landscape, or a portrait of somebody. But it doesn't have that same level of connection that I really did see at this convention, which is neat, where it's like people just love certain things. Like they're into it at the moment. And it may be fickle, because it could be a new show, it could be a new movie, it could be, just because they happen to recently get a white cat, they now love white cats, or they've always loved foxes or turtles or whatever. But they actually have a connection to it, want to do those things. And I've never really thought about it in those contexts, and try to bring an extra layer of depth to the work itself and why people would want it. And I thought that was really neat.
Yeah. So let's take it a level deeper. Mm-hmm. Why people buy. Cons are probably a really unique microcosm to study in terms of commerce, because there's literally nothing at a Comic-Con people need.
It's true.
So where does the need come from? Or not need, desire to purchase come from? What, outside of need, like we understand, I need a house to live in. I need food to nourish myself, and running water because I live in civilization. Those sort of things. Outside of basic needs, and we're talking, Maslow's hierarchy back to, Psych 101. What drives people to purchase? Because, another thing that's really common in cons is you can spend a lot of money there. A lot of money. What do you think, in your opinion, drives that? Why would someone want, and I'm very happy that she did it, but why would someone want an art print of Princess Peach, or a fox, or a white cat, or anything like that? What, outside of like, oh, I like cats, what is that? What leap does someone take to say, I like cats, I want to buy a print, or a picture, or a painting of a cat? Where do you think that leap comes from?
Well, so there's a couple questions to unpack there. One, why conventions work is, in my opinion, like people go there with an intent, like it's an event, it's special, it's community. A lot of other, you save up for those things, so you're already kind of in that buying window, which in something in business is always a challenge. Like when you're in sales and you cold call people, you have no idea where in their buying cycle they are. If you're trying to, like, we'll go back to your one laptop example or whatever. If you call somebody, you don't know if their computer's a piece of junk and they, need a laptop, or if they just recently have one, or if they have one for 6 months and it's been working great. So you don't quite know those windows. When they come to a convention, there's usually the intent to buy, which is fantastic. So you have that, at least you have hungry, eager people, and then it's trying to collect on what they would be interested in, which goes into like, why would they buy an animal print, or why would they buy one of Super Mario Brothers or My Hero Academia, whatever. Community is a big thing. Like, so anime communities, a lot of friends and family and stuff really do unite around specific things. I remember when I got married, we all wore Game of Thrones sigil socks just because we were all really into Game of Thrones at the time. So it was something to, really bond over and do stuff like that. So that's a huge element of it. The other thing I see a lot, that I really saw a lot this weekend, was people weren't necessarily buying for themselves. They were really buying for others. There was so much gift giving. So when they would go, be like, oh, I like so-and-so is going to love this, or, oh, I get them this every year, or I get them something. So a lot of times it wasn't even them getting for themselves, but a lot more gifts and things that they knew that people would like for as well.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna go back to Maslow, because I was thinking about this all day, and I had to reach back into my old psych days. So base level, Maslow's needs are a triangle. Base level is the physiological needs: air, water, food, sleep, etc., community even. Then you go into safety needs, and could be a security system for some of us. It could be a house with locking doors, whatever that would look like potentially. Employment's also a security need. We need to keep a job. We have to pay bills. That's security for us. Blah 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 blah. You get the point. Then you go up in this triangle, and you get in love and belonging. We, as human beings, we crave companionship. Whether that's a friendship, whether that's an intimate marriage, a relationship, whatever it could be. But then you get into these top two tiers of Maslow's hierarchy, which I think really fits what you're talking about of why do people buy. And the top two tiers in Maslow's hierarchy is self-esteem, and at the very tip, self-actualization. So self-esteem is going to be respect, self-esteem, recognition, strength, freedom, things that make us feel like we're improving ourselves, like we are getting better. I like to think I'm better than I was 10 years ago in most aspects of my life. I maybe not, but I like to think so. And I think it's a normal goal to continually improve yourself. But also perception is key. And one thing when I was in the military, one thing that was beaten into me, and I preach today because it made sense, is it doesn't matter what's true. Is perception is reality in the most strongest sense whatsoever. What you feel is true. It doesn't matter. What other people perceive as true is what is true at the end of the day. So self-esteem and how you are viewed by other people, I think probably plays a huge part in why people buy. But then that very tip of Maslow's hierarchy is self-actualization. And that means the desire to be the best me I can be. Is how I interpret it. I'm not a psychologist, please don't quote me. But self-actualization, how I interpret it is, I want to be the best Wyatt. You want to be the best Tanner you could be. And that's a normal human thing, to continually want to improve yourself. And sometimes we can do that with purchases. Sometimes it can be a nice new cardigan. Shout out to Brett. It could be, I buy records. See all these records back here? I don't know how that makes me a better me, but I like to think that it makes me more, well-rounded, more in touch with culture. And maybe people look at me and one of two people are going to say, oh, he's a weird hipster. Maybe. And the other people are going to, oh, he has an interest in music and, he has a taste and he has a hobby, which makes me more interesting to other people. And that is a strong desire for human beings to be interesting to others. Do you think that plays a huge part in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I really like what you're talking about with, we put a lot of value on what others think of us, even those who don't say that they do. When we're making purchases, we don't usually we don't ultimately make the decision based upon the actual item itself, but what we can use it for, or what, we could be seen wearing it, or what other people are going to think when they see it, right? So, if you're buying, let's say, art prints in your house, you're going to think about, the actions of hanging it on your wall, but more so you're going to be thinking about when people come over, you can show them these things. And it makes a statement about you because you're identifying you love certain games or you love these things. And it is unique because it's an artist created this and it's not, mass to the public. And so it's something special that only they have. And that gives them a certain sense of significance and, signals a certain, point of status or whatever. So I think that's a huge part of it too. And like I was saying, even with the gift giving part of it, they're not thinking about, again, the item, they're thinking about the reaction the person's going to have receiving that item. And then the point where they could go back and, oh, you remember when I gave that to you? Or, oh, do you love that thing? And they'll talk about, yeah. And you get your validation from those points. So really tying into the connection on those things is huge. It's the sense of belonging, it's the sense of self-worth, like you're saying. And then there's just also the value of buying things that you enjoy to make the space around you so much better. And then the feeling you get from that too.
Absolutely. So, small tangent here. This reminds me of probably one of the more profound lessons I ever learned in life. And I know that seems deep, but hear me out. So the year was 2011, and I was deployed overseas. I was in the country of Kosovo with the army. And in Kosovo was a unique situation. There was a line in the country where south of that line was pretty much safe. You could go shopping, you could go to restaurants, and then north of that line was some, stuff that wasn't encouraged for us to go to. But one time I was out with two of my friends in the army, and we had like a random day off. It was like a Sunday. We had like half a day off because we were always busy. But we went to go eat at a restaurant, maybe hit up a few grocery stores or get some unique items. And we ran into one gentleman. He was a Kosovar. He spoke Albanian. And while I was in the country, I learned Albanian. Please don't quote me on this. It was over 10 years ago. I can speak some words. But anyways, so I ran into this gentleman, an older guy, maybe 55, 60-ish. And he was super nice to us. He came up and approached us, and he talked a little bit. He knew some English. And he invited us to his house. Now, normal rules in the military said, no, don't go to a random international, citizen's house. But my senior person that I was with was like, you know what, let's try it. Let's go for an adventure. And I was really skeptical. I was scared. I was like, this feels like we're breaking some rules, but hear me out. So this guy was really nice. He's like, oh, and it was downpouring. And he's like, oh, hop in my car. I was like, oh, so now we're supposed to drive in this guy's car to this dude's random location. Long story short, we did it. And we get to his house and he invites us in for tea and, some cookies or whatever. And, we walk up to his house, and his house is like a 3-story, like cement block, looks very, post-Cold War Soviet Union type stuff. And it just didn't look appealing. It made me extra nervous. It looked bad, looked shady. So we walk in though, and this inside of his house was gorgeous. It was beautiful. There was granite everywhere and beautiful tile, and his furniture was immaculate, and he had wonderful paintings. And we sit down and have some tea, and finally I asked him, I was like, sir, I don't mean to be rude, but why is the inside of your house so beautiful, but the outside is really unappealing? I mean, weeds up to your chest and just cinder blocks, really. And he looked at me, he's like, I don't understand the question. He's like, I live on the inside of my house, not on the outside. And I sat back, I was like, holy cow. The difference in cultures, because, I live in a house and Fortunately, it's fall, which means my grass is finally dying. But before then, I have to mow it all the time, and I have to prune our shrubs and make sure our flowers look nice and the paint's touched up. And that's culturally appropriate for us to kind of show that off. Oh, look at my house. Look at my fresh lawn. If my neighbor mows my lawn, I know I have about 24 hours before I have to mow my lawn. But over there, I don't live on the outside of my house. That's crazy. And I've always come back to that discussion and that crazy time I went into a stranger's house in a different country. And man, I hope that guy's just living the best life, because he taught me a serious life lesson about like what's important. What's really important. Is impressing your neighbors important, or is living your best life important? And I think it's similar.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, that's such a wonderful story. You can take that in quite a few levels where, you can think of your outside as those that, sorry, the dog's barking there. Fun of live recordings. You can think of it as what you show the world isn't as important as what you show yourself and those that are closest around you, right? Because your inside is a place for friends. It's a place for family. It's where you should tend to. It's what you should make beautiful. The things that you show to the people, the outside that you project to, that don't really know you, that don't really mean anything to you, why put so much significance in it? In a world where we have social media and we try to think of all these things and we portray ourselves, in the end, we focus on the outward, on the outside, and we live in very shallow, cold, unappealing, and uncomfortable places. And I really like that metaphor. I'm going to play with that in my head for the week.
Yeah, think about that, because for 10 years, more than 10 years now, I have thought back on that incident, and just like, that man was so much wiser than I was and am today. Like this guy, I don't remember his name, barely spoke English. He taught me a serious life lesson that day. And, I live in America. I still have to mow my lawn. And if I didn't, the neighbors would get mad at me. But each time I do, I kind of think like, does this bring me happiness? And just circle all the way back, right? Because I'm good at tangents, Tanner. Sometimes you have to shut me up. Buying products at like a Comic-Con, for example, that brings them happiness. They enjoy that. That is their passion. They love cats. They love foxes. They love Princess Peach. They love Mario. They love whatever. And that brings them happiness. That makes them feel better. And they'll present that proudly, or they'll gift it, which is even better. That's wonderful too. But that it says something about that person. And it says, this is who I am. This is what I value. This is what I cherish. This is what I like. And hopefully you like the same thing, right? When their friends or their family come to visit, they see that picture of Princess Peach that Emily made, which was wonderful. I've seen all those pictures. They're wonderful. They're going to show that off. And someone sometimes going to enter their house and say like, wow, that is a beautiful piece. And they'll say, oh yeah, I love it. It's one of my favorite artworks. And they post it prominently in their living room. And because that's what they deem valuable.
Yeah. And the other part to kind of tie into what you're saying too is cosplay is such a huge part of those conventions. And just like you're saying, like showing the world who you are and what you value, that's what you do with costumes a lot of times. Here's what I like. Here's what I want to show off as. I'm investing way too much money on this thing that I only get to wear, one day a year, or I wear it for one day because it's a 3-day event. I have 3 costumes I'm going to show off, and it makes you unique and it makes you special. But it brings you into the community because so many of the attendees wear cosplay and they value those things. And it's that community, that tribe that you get from that. I think there's
acceptance there, because if you wore a Princess Peach costume to Walmart, you probably would get some negative comments.
Yeah.
But if you wore a Princess Peach costume to a Comic-Con, people are going to love you, right? It's about community, finding people who have similar interests and building that community, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and to wrap up this section, there was a T-shirt they had for sale there, and it says like NebrasKon is not a place; it's people. I like that. I really thought that was special too. So, yeah, it was a really good event. Learned a lot of neat things from it, and the biggest thing you can learn is just get out in front of a lot of people, get to interacting. Don't just sit behind your booth, but engage with people. There were so many sales and things that happened from that. Just learn from them based on the feedback they're giving you, even nonverbal ones where you're watching where they're looking and they completely miss a section. But mostly it was the wows, the big eyes looking at a specific thing, that's amazing whispered under their breath. all those things that happened gave Emily, so much excitement and motivation, and that's also the reason to want to do it. And we like that.
Absolutely. I can imagine. Well, good. Right. I'm glad it was a wonderful experience for you guys. I am excited for you guys to keep doing it. I love when you guys come up to Omaha. So awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
Yep. So story time. You got a couple for us?
Story time. I only have one story. I started with two, and as I was writing the second one, I deleted everything and wrote my own. Not a story, not a personal story, just kind of thoughts that I'd love to get your opinion on. But first, real story from www.youngupstarts.com. Fascinating website. If you ever get the chance, go visit it, all of you. There is an article called Supporting Entrepreneurs for a Better Tomorrow. So the theory is that starting a business usually feels extremely daunting, right? I think anyone who's even dabbled in entrepreneurship can agree. The second you decide you want to do something, the mountain forms in front of you of all the stuff you have to do, right? So perhaps more so right now, according to this article, as we all enter an economic and financial uncertainty period, we all know we're headed towards recession. Maybe it'll be avoided. I don't know. I'm not an economist. But right now, we're all kind of wondering what's going to happen financially and economically, right? In this country, globally, personally, in my house, all of those sort of things is on everyone's mind right now. The cool thing is that historically, times of turmoil, like where we're headed potentially, previous times in the 80s, and even in the Great Depression, times of extreme turmoil bred really, really positive change. It was a catalyst for change, and not only change, but exponential change. In process improvement, we always talk about you're continually getting better, right? The ladder it continually builds for whatever you're doing, whatever product you're building on or company, whatever. It's not 0 to 100 overnight, but you have to continually build on it. Turmoil accelerates that. The desire and need for change accelerates that. So what we're seeing, apparently, according to said article, is the entrepreneurial mindset sees solutions and not problems, which is why it's perfect for times of turmoil. We're full of problems. Every one of us can talk about a problem we're heading to. If we go into a deep recession, all of us are going to have problems. But an entrepreneur is a special type of mindset, is they don't necessarily see the problems. They see solutions to those problems. Instead of sticking in the woe is me, life is tough, they say, how can I fix this? Or what can I do to improve this? Or what can I do to fix this situation, right? So who do you think is going to lead this in the future? It's not the boomers, and it's not the millennials, Gen Z. So they did a survey here, and the survey blew my mind, honestly. 2/3 of Gen Z have already started or are planning to start their own business. So what will that mean for innovation in the future of business when 2/3 of people are entrepreneurial? In 20, 30 years, 2/3 of people in the workforce are going to be entrepreneurial minded, not corporate minded, entrepreneurial. They're going to see problems as just the start of a cool solution, not just a problem and woe is me. And I think that's going to change so many things on the face of Earth, on the face of the earth, in every country, when the vast majority of people look at problems and want to solve them immediately, not just, sit in them and hope they get better, but stand up, look at that mountain ahead of them and say, let's fix this problem. And not only let's fix this problem, can I fix this problem for people other than myself, for my neighbors, for people all across the world? And I think that's going to be amazing in the next 20, 30 years. This article, for the first time in a long time, gave me a lot of hope for the near future. Things just look bleak, and I think every generation goes through a bleak period. Things just look bleak with, conflicts and wars and recessions and pandemics. Things have just kind of sucked lately. But knowing that there's a generation out there where 2/3 of them look at it and say, I bet I can fix that, is really empowering. It's really awesome. So entrepreneurship is the future, and that got me really excited to read this article. So more importantly, so we always know, and I mentioned this last podcast, the United States, Silicon Valley, they always are a part of these major, inventions and new innovations. But what we're finding is that the AMEA, Asia, Middle East, and Africa in particular, seem poised to ignite the world of entrepreneurship, which is what I'm reading in this article. Asia, Middle East, and Africa, for example, that region has almost 60% of the global youth. 60% of the global youth reside in Asia, Africa, or the Middle East. And we already discussed 2/3 of those people are entrepreneurial. So India has become the third largest startup ecosystem after the US and China. Africa, several startups there are starting to reach unicorn status. Southeast Asia, startups are forecast to be combined to see a combined valuation of $1.1 trillion by 2025 coming out of Southeast Asia, which is phenomenal. But how do these businesses find success and blossom? You know, how do they find staffing? How do they find talent? The answer's very obvious: online. Remote work, remote staff, the open access to the internet and to talent and to tools that are typically were reserved for a corporate entity are now widespread. People, kids in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East have access to tools that they never could have imagined having access to now, and are utilizing that with their really cool entrepreneurial mindset to solve really cool problems. And it's been fascinating. So more importantly, what will the future look like when 2/3 of people are entrepreneurial minded? And more importantly, how socially conscious the new generation is. So let's talk about super entrepreneurial, super invested in social problems. I really have so much faith in this upcoming generation is what I'm trying to say. Because not only do they see things that maybe for decades, for generations, we maybe let slide, and I'm talking socially, and they see that, and then they also have the mindset of, let's fix it. This is not just a problem, this is a problem that can be fixed. And it makes me really hopeful for the future. I've been in this bleak news cycle of Ukraine and Russia and China and all of these things, and the U.S. getting involved in all of this, and God knows we're about to enter our own election cycle, which is a beast in the United States. It lasts over a year, honestly. And I've noticed that emotionally I've been a little down. And I read this article and I thought, you know what? If these kids can get up to be adults, we might be okay. They might help the world. They might fix a lot of the problems that either we tried to fix and failed or blatantly ignored potentially. And because of the digital world, because of this new mindset of this generation to want to fix problems, it all is equaling this perfect storm where they're poised to just blow the world away, and in a positive way. They're going to change things for the better, make it more fair, more honest, less about individual or corporate greed, and more about what's best for humanity. And I truly believe this. After, I read this article and I went on a deep dive, and I was just absolutely blown away. So I'm going to take a breath here, and I'm going to let you recap or share your thoughts on that before I finish this article.
Okay. So there's a few things that you talked about. Have you ever heard of the concept of the region beta paradox?
Mm-mm.
So it goes off the premise that, let's say you have somebody and they will walk to a place if it's up to a mile, but if it's a mile or greater, they'll ride their bike. And there's a point of time and effort that it takes that is greater once it hits a certain tipping point. So it takes just as long to walk just 1 mile as it would to ride 2 miles. So there's a certain threshold of pain or some triggering point in which you will take action. And for so long, people have been living in this this numb unhappiness, but it's not so bad that they actually want to take action. And so if you think about the last 40 years where there's been a lot of prosperity, there's been a lot of opportunity, there's been a lot of things, that can, keep you comfortable, give you some opportunity. Those are all changing. The new generation that we have now is actually reporting making less money than their parents. There's more people living at home with their parents. Most of the wealth has just kind of followed the boomer generation along. And I found some graphic talking about talking about science grants and how it's just followed the age bracket of the boomers the entire time of what's been given. So for the longest time, it was 30-year-olds, and then the next decade it was 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds. It's just followed them.
Gotcha.
And so a lot of the money's come with that. So you have to get a little scrappier. There is more pain now to be more thrifty than there's ever been. So having this new generation come up, realizing that they need to be more independent, they need to solve problems, they can't rely on other companies to just make their life better. That's a beautiful thing. And I would rather have them focus on that than a big corporation or a government, but actually want to take life by their hands and do those things. And the other thing that they have now that previous generations never did is just the access to information and learning. You can learn more from podcasts and YouTube and all those other things than you can from a college course. Most college courses are now online for free. And most people are realizing that those degrees really don't get you anywhere if you're going to start your own company. Absolutely. If you want to go serve the man in some way, in some sense, you need those certifications. You need those degrees. The people who are the gatekeepers who don't know if you can actually deliver on what they need are going to rely on some sort of outside validation to prove that you can. But if you're starting your own company, you don't need those things. You're learning so much more from doing than the hypothetical.
Absolutely.
So, I'm really excited for that future. So I think that's a really neat concept.
Yeah, and it's, I don't want to get into personal opinions too much here, but it's always bugged me when I hear people talk about the new generation just lazy and they sit on their phones and their tablets and they spend a lot of time on devices, but you know what? Devices and the internet is not only the future, it's the present. And this generation probably has a huge leg up on us. Tanner, do you remember the very first time you accessed the internet? I do. I'll let you think on it. I remember I was in elementary school. Our school got one computer. It was in the library. And the only internet access that we were allowed to have was the Encyclopedia Britannica. And the librarian would stand over your shoulder to make sure you weren't wiggling the mouse too much. Because if you wiggled the mouse too much, the internet would freeze and the computer would freeze and you had to restart the entire computer. But we were able to look at the encyclopedia online, and that was a huge freaking deal. Do you remember the first time, give or take, when you were on the internet?
So when I was really familiar with it, I guess, was probably 5th grade, I would say. So that makes you, 11 years old? So this would have been, goodness, I was born in, so it would have been 96, 97, around there. There was the iMacs, the colorful iMacs that were in the computer lab. I remember those. Oh, yeah. And so you could get online there. And I think that's the first time I really got on the internet and had some sort of like independence and understood what we were doing with it. Back when things like Ask Jeeves was more of a thing.
Yeah, Ask Jeeves.
You could go around. We got computers early in my house. But I think when I really got a computer that I could use, I was probably like 13 or 14. So those computer labs were probably my first real access. I do remember Apple II computers in elementary school with the green monitors. And things like that. But yeah, Central.
Everyone loved playing Oregon Trail. Absolutely. Okay. So this last one, this is not an article. Like I said, I started to write up an article and I changed my mind. The article I was going to quote and talk about was called The Beginner's Guide to Producing VR Projects. And I picked this one for me and my 8-year-old daughter because we are both obsessed with the Oculus right now. So I got an Oculus last year and I'm obsessed with it, and my 8-year-old is obsessed with it. We're just blown away. It feels like we're living in the future, and sure, there's crazy limitations and stuff like that. But for what is out there, it seems mind-blowing. So I started to write some, quotes about this article and about how to produce VR content, and learning that producing VR content is actually really complicated, more so than your average, digital content. It's hard to make something look good in 3D, essentially. And I'm sure as a digital artist, you were very familiar with that concept. The development time and the effort is harder. But then I was like, I don't personally care about VR development. I will probably never develop a VR app. I don't have the skill set for that. But it got me thinking. Zuckerberg, I have an Oculus Quest 2, the VR headset. It's great. It's cool. I see that there's a new Pro version coming out soon. Looks even lighter and more advanced, whatever. Zuckerberg is dropping his fortune, his reputation on the metaverse, right? We've all heard it. It's on every news network. He is investing. He's really putting it all in the metaverse. And there's been some studies coming out that like metaverse employees, like only like less than half of the metaverse and meta employees actually believe in, VR as the future and things like that. But it got me thinking, I'm obsessed with it. I don't know if I'd want to work within an Oculus headset, but do you personally, and this is something that I'm going to ask audience later after this podcast, I would like feedback from people who listen to this as well. Do you think there's a future in business in VR, and not the business of creating VR content? I'm talking business in virtual reality, meetings, all of these things in virtual reality. Do you see that as an honest future prospect?
Yeah. So there's two different things so Mark Zuckerberg, he's going more full VR and Apple's going more augmented reality. Mm-hmm. I feel that augmented reality has an amazing place in the future, like wide use in the future. The whole concept of NFTs, which sounds so ridiculous now, but if you're in an augmented reality future where you don't have a TV because your glass is projected up, you don't necessarily need art because you can project it on, and having the quote original version of those is actually important and would have some, signaling to go with it. They have the original. That has a neat feature with it. The ability to have one laptop and then have your glasses turn it on to some multi-monitor crazy thing has a lot of use case and a lot of things. I think it'll be hard for people to fully disconnect from the world for long-term use, but if you could think about VR in terms of gaming, but also like online meetings where you have a digital representation of yourself that may be photorealistic. But one thing that I was listening to not too long ago talked about, why would you need to show your true self? You could be whoever you want to be online. You have more pseudo-anonymity. You might be more of an avatar. Then sex won't matter, race won't matter, what your looks like don't matter because, better looking people statistically will do better at business. All those things won't matter when you have some digital representation. And there, of course, it won't be like the VR club chat where, it's an alien talking to a penguin, talking to
I don't know. That'd be
Colonel Sanders.
Really fun, like quarterly rocks and pebble meeting. That'd be funny.
But it'd be tamed to a certain degree, just like the backgrounds on a Zoom filtered now. But having that ability to connect and work with people totally digital, but still feel more connected, still have some digital version of eye contact, have a little bit more connection that way and feel more presence around each other, I think has a huge future. And I would think that's where we're more going.
Yeah, that was well said. So I turned around. I didn't mean to be rude. Do you ever think we're going to get to a Ready Player One world?
I don't.
Okay.
I feel like we're too primal still. There's a need for physical things. There's a need for physical actions that keep our brain healthy. The ability to walk every day, get outside, be present, walk in nature, and have that physical connection to the earth has something primal in our brains that I don't feel that digital will really do unless we go to a new level of cyborg that we're not even thinking about. Which I know there's Neuralink and all these other things that happen, or that are, sci-fi now, but could potentially happen. But I think there's a connection to the real world that we're just instinctively and naturally, and our brains are going to want to keep us happy, that a full VR set won't, but there'll be novelty situations to take you away, just like you watch a movie or you'll go, play a game or something.
Absolutely. Yeah, entertainment value, I see it's only going to skyrocket, and projections of market share in virtual reality are only like astronomically high. But that's in the entertainment industry. For example, on my Oculus, there's a Netflix app. I can go watch Netflix in like an alpine village with a snowy cabin, and it's just linked to my Netflix. So last year I watched the entire series of Supernatural. Oh Jesus, that's an undertaking. But I could log in and just lay on my bed and watch it in a massive screen. But that's entertainment value. Business, and I know there's business apps out there. There's meeting, apps, and exactly what you said. You can have avatars. I just haven't heard of a successful situation where that is being widely used and accepted. Because exactly as you said, I think COVID taught us a really valuable lesson. Is that human beings, regardless of how connected to the internet we are on our phones, we all have our phones next to us. COVID and being quarantined taught a lot of people a really valuable lesson that, exactly as you said, I think it might be hardwired as human beings that the real world holds value to us and we miss it. And going outside is valuable to human beings. Not only is it healthy, but physically and mentally, and there's serious things, and I agree with your assessment about the Ready Player One question. I know that was silly, just meant to start conversation. I don't imagine human beings being that way because of what I learned during COVID, during that whole quarantine thing. I'm a serious introvert, and I craved being outside. The occasional time I got to go to the grocery store when it was really, hitting hard and something like that, even with a mask and all this stuff, I treasured my time outside. And I think for most people, of course, there's going to be individual situations. I think for most people, VR is going to remain a very top-notch novelty thing. And I think it's going to, in entertainment, it's going to only get bigger. I imagine, movie theaters someday having individual VR headsets and all these sort of things, whatever. But I love your point about augmented reality. I can see that. I can see the value in that, and I can see how people can utilize it in the future.
Yeah, I think both VR and AR will be really good to supplement things, but they'll never fully replace it. So you'll have that ability for more efficient shopping, more efficient meetings, more efficient, better media, more immersive things, but it'll never fully replace interacting with people. It'll never fully replace the outside. It'll never fully replace a good workout, exercise, whatever it is. They're the basic things that we've done for thousands of years or way before then, we still need to do because we haven't evolved that quickly. Technology goes fast, but we're still very much the same primitive people we were 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago.
Well, you heard it here, people. Come back in 30 years and tell me if Tanner was wrong. All right, Tanner, bring us home, bud. That's all I got.
Yeah. Well, no, I think we had a fantastic discussion today. Really appreciate my time with you. I'm really excited for, again, all the people who have been so supportive, reached out to us. Wyatt did pose the question, what's your thoughts on VR and AR? We'd love to hear about those things as well. If you haven't already, subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your favorite podcast. And we will post these on YouTube as well, the video versions, if everything lines up and works well. I did have my camera die halfway through. Yeah. Well, I've been playing with the new phone. You can use your iPhone as a webcam, and it looks really cool. But then I didn't charge my phone, and so
it's an important piece of the puzzle. Yeah.
I just didn't think about it getting into it. So all the fun things that happen with trying to set up new stuff. But again, thank you everybody for listening. We will catch you next week.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.